The Young and the Restless spoilers. Sally had never felt such an exhilarating rush of possibility before. It seemed as though she was finally moving forward with her life, leaving behind the heartbreak and disappointments of her past. Her connection with Billy felt liberating at first, a tantalizing glimmer of affection and excitement that swept her off her feet. She had struggled for so long to forget Adam, his betrayal, the broken promises, and all the emotional wreckage left in his wake. At last, Sally allowed herself to believe she had found something new and real with Billy, someone who made her feel alive again, even if he had a notorious reputation for irresponsibility. Yet, in the midst of her cautiously growing optimism, the shock of a positive pregnancy test changed everything in an instant. In the stillness of her tiny bathroom, Sally stared at the small, definitive line that indicated she was pregnant. A maelstrom of emotions tore through her. Initially, she felt that inexplicable surge of joy, a sense that her life was about to embark on a brand new chapter. She remembered how she had once yearned for a stable family, a dream that seemed so far out of reach when she was younger. Now, she had been given an opportunity to create a family of her own. But that hope collided with cold, unforgiving reality. Billy Abbott, for all his charm, was not a man known for stability. In Genoa City, rumors flew thick and fast about his impulses, his tendency to self-sabotage, and his pattern of leaving the women who loved him behind as soon as he grew bored. Sally's exhilaration rapidly mixed with a creeping fear, and she couldn't help but wonder if her future might be far darker than she had initially imagined. Everything she had heard about Billy's tumultuous past relationships replayed in her mind like a warning siren. He was infamous for his inability, or outright refusal, to commit. He might woo a woman with lavish gestures and heartfelt declarations, but he had never been able to settle down into something as daunting as a real family life. Despite these warnings, Sally had chosen to give him a chance. She believed that maybe, just maybe, he could change. She had glimpsed moments of genuine tenderness in Billy. There was a vulnerability in him that she found beautiful, even if he tried to cloak it behind his trademark bravado. Deep down, she hoped that the news of her pregnancy could help him see the value in responsibility and loyalty, that it might inspire him to become the father and partner she needed. Perhaps love, hope, and a child on the way would force him to grow up at last. Yet the conversation she had dreaded, revealing that she was carrying his baby, could not have gone worse. She had rehearsed the scenario in her head. He would look startled, certainly, but then he might smile, maybe embrace her with trembling excitement, vowing to make this work. At least, that was the fantasy. What happened instead was a jarring confrontation between Sally's idealism and Billy's brutal honesty. His eyes flashed in a mixture of anxiety and annoyance. He stammered something about this not being in his plan. Then, with a shrug that made her chest tighten, he suggested that the simplest solution was to end the pregnancy. An abortion, he said, would be the easiest way to keep their lives uncomplicated. Sally stood there, her heart in her throat, listening to a man she had trusted talk about their unborn child as though it were some minor inconvenience. It took all her willpower not to crumble on the spot. She had yearned for this pregnancy, maybe not in the sense that she had meticulously planned for it, but in a deep, emotional way that connected to her dreams of a real family. Overcoming Adam's betrayal had been an arduous journey. She'd been so scarred by her past relationship and the loneliness that followed. But this child signified a new start, a new kind of love, one she had not expected and yet cherished with every fiber of her being. Billy showed no signs of cherishing it. He paced the room in agitation, listing the obstacles that stood in their way. What about his freedom? His business dealings? How could he possibly play father to a child when he could barely keep his own life in order for more than a few months at a time? Any warmth she might have detected in him earlier seemed to vanish under the weight of his self-interest. As he spoke, Sally felt a wave of nauseating despair roll through her. Her throat felt tight. She remembered the lonely nights after Adam left, how she had wept, feeling worthless and unlovable. And she realized, with crushing clarity, that this moment with Billy was threatening to become an echo of that same isolation. But Sally was no longer that timid woman who allowed heartbreak to define her every move. She had built herself back up after Adam, forging a steely determination she never knew she possessed. Even if Billy did not want to step up, Sally intended to protect her baby. She would do anything to ensure that this precious life she carried would not be snuffed out by Billy's selfishness and fear. The next few days were an emotional battlefield. Billy kept pressing her to consider his so-called practical solution. He insisted that neither of them was ready for this kind of commitment, that they would only hurt each other if they tried to force a relationship, especially with a child involved. He talked about the ugliness of custody battles, financial strains, and how it might all implode if they refused to see reason. The more he talked, the more Sally felt an iron resolve forming within her. Despite her tenacity, the heartbreak was undeniable. She had chosen Billy precisely because she saw a spark in him, an energy that reminded her there was more to life than the cycle of doubt and regret she had known with Adam. There had been laughter, thrilling adventures, and a sense of raw passion she found intoxicating. Now, that passion twisted into a weapon aimed right at her dreams. She found herself facing the cold truth: Billy Abbott was not going to transform into a doting partner simply because they shared a child. He was not going to suddenly abandon his reckless impulses or shape himself into the stable man she craved. That realization stung more than any betrayal she had known, because this time, she had dared to let herself hope. In the aftermath of their volatile confrontation, Sally shut herself away in her apartment. The curtains remained drawn, and the phone calls she received from well-meaning friends went unanswered. She could not bear to explain the situation over and over. What would she say anyway? That she had gotten herself caught up in yet another disastrous romance? That she was pregnant and terrified? That her child's father wanted nothing to do with either of them? Adam had left her broken, but Billy was tearing at whatever fragile faith she had managed to reconstruct in the time since. Still, amidst the tears and the recurrent pangs of morning sickness, she felt a fierce determination to protect this new life. She imagined the little heartbeat within her, that tiny promise of a future that didn't have to be overshadowed by lost loves. Even if Billy refused to be part of it, Sally would become a mother. She would not allow her dreams to be dictated by a man who could so easily discard her. Days later, Billy knocked at her door, looking sullen and regretful. The charming bravado that once captivated her was gone. He lingered in the hallway, reluctant to come inside, as if the threshold separated them more profoundly than any physical space ever could. In a low voice, he reiterated that he still believed an abortion was the wisest path. His tone had softened, morphing into something resembling pity or guilt. He didn't want to hurt her, he claimed, but life was complicated, and he was not father material. A surge of anger overtook Sally. She told him, in no uncertain terms, that she would not consider his so-called practical solution. She was keeping the baby. She would raise this child with or without him. If he wanted no part in their lives, so be it. But she would not crumble under his demands or chase after him, begging for scraps of affection. She had traveled that treacherous road before, trying to prove her worth to men who viewed her as an accessory, a passing fling, or a stepping stone to some other ambition. She would not make the same mistake again. Looking at him then, Sally recognized that Billy would never see parenthood as anything but a cage. That didn't mean she had to chain herself to his volatile moods and emotional unavailability. For all of her flaws and insecurities, Sally had always harbored a quiet strength. Now that strength was bolstered by the knowledge that she carried a life that deserved better than half-hearted commitment or reluctant promises. Billy seemed almost relieved at Sally's declaration. He mumbled something about sending money, making arrangements if she insisted on going through with it. But the lack of genuine emotion in his words only confirmed that he was as much a lost cause as everyone had warned. Her eyes brimmed with tears, not because she still clung to him, but because she understood that any future they might have had was irreparably shattered. He said a curt goodbye and left, an awkward, stifling silence filling the space where dreams of a family once lingered. When she was finally alone, Sally let out a breath she felt she had been holding for years. A swirl of heartbreak, anger, and fragile hope churned inside her. Yes, she was facing an uncertain future as a single mother, possibly without the emotional or financial support of the child's father. Yes, she would have to navigate the same gossip-laden halls of Genoa City that had never been kind to her personal life. But for the first time in a long while, Sally felt a flicker of genuine autonomy. This was her choice, her child, and she would fight for the happiness and stability she deserved, no matter how many times life tried to knock her down. She remembered Adam's condescending smirk, the callous way he dismissed her dreams, and then Billy's flippant approach to fatherhood. Perhaps she had a knack for falling for men who saw relationships as disposable. But that pattern didn't have to continue. The child she carried was not a mistake, it was a chance to break free from destructive cycles, a chance to rewrite her story and become someone who wouldn't be defined by the men who walked in and out of her life. And so, Sally stood in the quiet of her living room, resting a protective hand over her abdomen. From this point on, she vowed to move forward on her own terms. No matter how dark the road ahead might seem, or how vicious the whispers in Genoa City became, she would hold on to the conviction that she and her baby would forge a brighter future. As for Billy Abbott, let him return to his reckless patterns and escapades. Let him remain unbound and unbothered. Eventually, he might learn how to regret the moment he urged her to end a life that could have brought them both a profoundly different kind of happiness. Sally refused to let his cowardice snuff out her hope. She had dreamed once of finding love strong enough to sustain her, and though it wasn't Billy, she realized the person who would stand by her side, unwavering, had to be herself. She would guard that child's life fiercely. And in time, perhaps she would heal again, stronger than before, determined to never settle for anything less than a love that was genuine, respectful, and brave enough to face life's uncertainties without running away. Sally's struggle. A dream of family, a reality of betrayal, a longing for family, a life of disappointment. Sally Spectra had never wanted much, at least, not in the way people often assumed. Yes, she was ambitious. Yes, she was sharp, determined, and sometimes ruthless in her pursuits. But beneath all of that, beyond the reputation she had built for herself as a fiery, independent woman, there was something else she had always longed for, a family. A real, stable, loving family. She had spent too much of her life fending for herself, learning how to survive in a world that was often unforgiving. She had played the games, fought for recognition, and endured heartbreaks that left her doubting whether she would ever find true happiness. And then, she had met Billy Abbott, a man who was just as lost as she was. Billy, once a powerful and rebellious force in the corporate world, was now a shadow of his former self. His life was unraveling in slow motion. He had lost everything, his job, his influence, and perhaps worst of all, the respect of his own family. Jill Abbott, his own mother, had washed her hands of him, dismissing him as a disappointment she could no longer afford to clean up after. Johnny and Katie, his children, had become distant figures in his life, casualties of his inability to commit to fatherhood in any meaningful way. But Sally saw something in him that others didn't, or maybe refused to see. She saw a man who had been beaten down but still had potential. She saw the flickers of charm, intelligence, and passion that had once made him such a force to be reckoned with. Maybe, just maybe, she could be the one to help him find his way back. And then she found out she was pregnant. It should have been a moment of joy. A confirmation that her dream of building a family was finally within reach. But instead, it was a moment of absolute devastation. Because Billy didn't want the baby. Billy's reaction. The ultimate betrayal. When Sally had told him, she had braced herself for shock, for hesitation, even for fear. But she hadn't expected disdain. Billy had laughed, not out of joy, but out of disbelief. "This is a mistake, Sally," he had said, shaking his head. "You know that, right? A mistake." That was what he called their child. Sally's breath had caught in her throat. She had fought too hard, endured too much, to accept that answer. She had built her life from nothing, clawed her way to success, and survived heartbreak that would have crushed weaker women. She had lost a child before, a child with Adam Newman, and the pain of that loss still lingered, even now. And yet, Billy looked at her like this was an inconvenience, not a miracle. He had no job. No stability. No direction. And instead of seeing this as a reason to step up, to take control of his life and fight for something real, he wanted the easy way out. "You should get rid of it," he had said, his voice as cold as she had ever heard it. "You know I can't be a father right now. Hell, I'm barely even a father to Johnny and Katie. What makes you think I'd be different this time?" Sally had wanted to scream. To shake him, to slap him, to make him see what he was doing, what he was throwing away. But she had known, in that moment, that Billy Abbott was not going to change. No matter how much she loved him. No matter how much she wanted to believe in him. Jill Abbott, a legacy of ruthlessness. If there was one person who could have convinced Billy to step up, it was Jill Abbott. His mother had spent years bailing him out, forcing him to clean up his messes, and giving him chances that he repeatedly squandered. But Jill did not take Sally's side. Instead, she made things worse. Jill had flown into town like a storm, barely giving Sally a chance to speak before delivering her verdict. "You're making a mistake," Jill had said flatly, her sharp gaze cutting through Sally like a blade. "Billy can't even take care of himself, let alone a child. Do you really think bringing a baby into this mess is a good idea?" "It's my choice, Jill," Sally had replied, her voice trembling but firm. "And I want this baby." Jill had sighed, shaking her head in disappointment. "You're smarter than this, Sally. You're ambitious. You have a future ahead of you. Don't let a baby with Billy Abbott be the thing that drags you down." She had said it so casually, so effortlessly, as if she were talking about a failed business deal, not a human life. Sally had never felt more alone. Billy wanted nothing to do with this child. Jill wanted the problem to disappear. And Sally? Sally just wanted to fight for the life growing inside her. A future without Billy. There was no grand confrontation. No dramatic speech that changed Billy's mind. Because in the end, he simply walked away. He gave her money. He told her to take care of it. He told her that he wasn't cut out for this, and that if she kept the baby, she was doing it on her own. Sally had never expected a fairy tale. But she also hadn't expected this level of cowardice. She had chosen Billy because she thought he was different. But in the end, he was just another man who couldn't handle responsibility. And so, Sally made a choice. She would keep her baby. She would raise this child on her own. She would build the family she had always dreamed of, even if she had to do it without Billy Abbott. Because in the end, she realized something important: a real family isn't about blood. It's about love. About commitment. About showing up, even when things are hard. And Billy? Billy Abbott didn't know the first thing about any of that. So, Sally let him go. Let Jill's disapproval wash over her. And prepare to walk this path alone, not because she had to, but because she refused to let a man like Billy Abbott define what she was capable of. She had lost a baby before. She wouldn't lose this one. And whether Billy ever regretted his decision or not, she would never look back.